Hello, everyone. It is Jenny and Laurie of Astropath here today to talk about the Capricorn season 2024. We're getting to the end of the year. As a quick introduction for those of you who are new here, Jenny Date, you can follow her at hiddenpath.com. You can follow me at lauriefarrington.com. And below here, you'll find all the links to follow us in all the places. Before I go on, what do you have to tell people about that you're doing right now?
Well, I have some workshops and I'm busily, marketing for those. So if you're interested in any of those in-person workshops in the Vermont area, I have those. So check those out on my website at hiddenpathastrology.com/workshops. And then the other thing I just want to mention is that I have been doing a short video series called The Short Answer. It's on this channel, and we're going to talk about the nodal axis today. And there is a short answer on the nodal axis for you to check out. So I think that's it. Oh, one other thing, I have cool astrology cards for sale too, which I'm working on getting on my website. So email me if you're interested in those. Okay.
Awesome. And you also have your seasonal meditation videos.
Oh yeah, I'm about to put out the Capricorn one will go out pretty soon after this video. So yeah.
Yeah, so pay attention to all of that stuff. And as for myself, I've got my new book available.
Yay.
It's not quite showing up good here,
There you
but
go.
How to Read and Interpret a Birth Chart Guidepost for Understanding Natal Astrology. You can pre-order that on Barnes& and Noble or on Amazon. It's coming out on January 8th. So do that. And also, I did a conversation on my friend Erica Robinson's YouTube channel. You might want to check out. We'll have a link for that below also. You can follow her. She's great. She's absolutely great. The name of her YouTube channel is In the Company of Cards. And yeah, we have a great conversation. So check that out as well. Other than that, I guess we should start to dive into the conversation about Capricorn season. Let's see. First off, Capricorn season starts on December 21st. That is the solstice, right, Jenny?
Sure is.
How exciting. The solstice, the winter solstice in, this side of this hemisphere, it's the winter solstice. To me, it's one of the most exciting moments of the year because right now we are in such a dark, it's dark by 3:30. It's dark, dark, dark. And I always, celebrating the solstice is really important. Personally, I find it very important. And I watch it every single day after that. We get a tiny little bit more light. And it's not very long before we start seeing that difference. It's really
Yeah,
quite amazing.
it's true.
So we really want to celebrate the start of Capricorn season as the solstice. And so Capricorn season starts on the 21st of December and ends on the 19th of January 2025.
hmm Yeah, and Capricorn's one of the cardinal signs, and that's why it's lined up with the solstice in Western astrology. So the cardinal signs are kind of like the cardinal points of the compass. They're the starter signs. So Capricorn always signifies, okay, now we're really in the beginning of winter. But also, as Lori says, the light is beginning to return. So it kind of carries that. That's a very yin yang thing, where it's like the dark of winter, but the light is returning. So that's really what Capricorn season kicks off. But Capricorn's a pretty amazing sign. It's an earth sign, and I always think of it as the sign that knows how to move the mountain. And it knows how to move the mountain because it knows how to retreat and go in and make a plan and figure out who's going to help, and then come out with that CEO energy of like the guiding energy of like, hey, we're going to move that mountain there over here, and here's how we're going to do it. And here's who's going to do what, and this is all how it's going to work. So it really knows how to orchestrate these massive energies. And for that reason, Capricorn is associated with some of the I think of the levers of power. It sometimes is associated with the patriarchy, with dictatorships. These are obviously some of the darker faces, but it really has that ability to kind of wield power.
Mhm.
Um, Going from those dark ideas to a brighter idea of Capricorn, well, the key word here is integrity. When
Mhm.
Capricorn really goes within to suss out what is best for all concerned and then comes out to guide and to, move that mountain again, for forward movement, there's a real sense of integrity, and it moves totally away from that tyrannical behavior that it can represent. So that's just a quick synopsis of sort of the dark and light of Capricorn. But what
Mhm.
do you think of with Capricorn, Lori?
Well, I was distracted because I was trying to get my microphone to behave properly. So I apologize for that. But yeah, Capricorn is such a powerful force. It is ruled by Saturn, and it is really the sign of ambition. And you can see, if you just think of the word ambition, you can see how ambition that does not have integrity behind it, what that becomes. And ambition that does have integrity built into it, what that can create. And to me, that's just, the two polar opposites of the light and the dark of Capricorn. It's a very, very powerful sign.
Yeah. I know it's funny because I think something that happens to me, and this has happened to me lately, is where there's been a lot of charts recently I've looked at where I see a Mars in Capricorn. And
Mm,
it's interesting thinking about whenever I see that Mars in Capricorn, I know immediately that this is a person with significant organizational and strategical capacities at
mm,
their fingertips. And most of the time, once I sit down and have the conversation with a person, sure enough, they are somebody who's moving a lot of pieces.
mm,
And it's really, I really like that. I mean, Mars is considered to be pretty happy, exalted in Capricorn, but that's always one of those. I'm like, oh, okay, they have the Capricorn thing. Like they're gonna really move the dial here. So it is interesting. But the other thing is it's a yin sign, so it does have this
mm,
inward component to it. It does have a relationship to the hermit archetype. So the idea of the hermit needing to go into the mountainside cave and really have silence, which Earth really needs sometimes, and have that time for deep internal reflection in order to understand the process that then needs to be unfolded. And this Capricorn season, like any other, but certainly this one definitely shows that need to be in alignment personally, deeper, inwardly, in order to know what actions to take. That is a huge theme during this season. So
I love it that you brought that up, just the solitude necessary for Capricorn. And I think that is so tied in with the issue of integrity, because Capricorn, anyone with a strong component of Capricorn, in order to be in integrity, they have to be able to pull themselves away from society and look within. Otherwise, they get into that thing of playing to the crowd, trying to get to get attention. And that's when they lose their own sense of what's right and what's wrong. And you don't have to look very far to see Capricorn gone wrong.
I sure don't.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's because we live in a society that does not emphasize solitude, that
right.
does not emphasize the need to go within and retract and withdraw, and in order to deeply understand the self. But that's exactly why Capricorn is so out of balance in our society that we might see a lot of examples of. It's for that reason. It's not because it's inherently bad. It's
Yeah.
because we
And
need to.
I also think that it's really interesting that I encounter a lot of people who make the assumption that Capricorn is a yang or a male sign. And
Yeah.
it's not. It is a yin sign, it's a more female sign. And that's something that people make that mistake all the time because Capricorn's one of the strongest signs. And in our culture, that is seen in a different way than reality. Right.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you brought that up because you're right. That happens a lot where that assumption is made, and I think that that's also part of the bigger story that we need to reconnect the Capricorn energy to the feminine side of things because
Yes.
I mean, as I've carried on in my astrology journeys, I think more and more about the crone phase of life
Yeah.
is a Capricorn phase, like the crone, the old woman who carries the wisdom, who knows all these things and has this intuitive knowledge, and is able to impart just a lot of guidance and wisdom. And that I think that's what, for a full rich picture of Capricorn, that needs to be incorporated.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I see another video in our future
Oh,
about
yeah, my
Capricorn.
mind just immediately wants to go into this whole thing
Yeah,
about the Saturn
yeah, totally.
returns and the crone. And yeah,
Yeah,
we could go on about
yeah,
that very easily.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, there's probably a bunch of other things we could say about Capricorn, but I think we've hit the key points.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the chart. Does that talk about the
Okay, let's do that. Let's open up the chart itself. And this is just a chart for the moment that the sun enters Capricorn. So we see right down here is the sun in Capricorn, and Capricorn season begins. So what we want to do is look at some of the important pieces, some of the important themes, and then we'll go from there looking at the week by week exactly what's happening throughout the season. But what do you see for themes here, Jenny? There's a lot going on.
lot going on. Well, let's start with the simple fact that the sun you see there is at 0 Capricorn. I just want to say that 0 Capricorn, 0 Aries, 0 Libra, and 0 Cancer, all four of those points, those cardinal points, can be summarized as what's called the Aries point. And the Aries point, so 0 degrees of cardinal signs, is always a place of prominence, is a place where something really shows up. So Capricorn moving into that, yes, we're at a solstice, big deal. Like, hey, hello, this is an important time. So that takes your attention right away to, I think, just the nodal point would be the first thing I would notice, because the nodal point is at 2 degrees of Aries. And by definition, the nodal axis moves backwards compared to the other planets. So it is not moving forwards in Aries, it's moving back towards Pisces. And so that point, 2 degrees Aries, actually all the way back to 28 Pisces, that's considered in the zone of the Aries point. So what I'm saying here is the North Node is very prominent throughout this whole season. And the North Node has a heck of a lot to say about the direction we are moving in personally and on a collective level.
Hmm.
That's the first thing I see.
Yeah. So that does that the nodal axis as it is just getting ready to leave the polarity of Aries and Libra to enter the polarity of Pisces and Virgo is forming a square aspect to the sun just as it gets to that Aries point. And it is really fascinating that that's happening. The nodal axis takes about 18 months to move through. So it's a culmination of a process that's been going on since the summer of 2023 that is kind of culminating at this time at
Yeah.
the Aries point. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, and just for a short little thing to think about, the synopsis here is that what that means is anything you do during Capricorn season is having an impact on your overall direction. So it adds
Right.
a weight to this idea of the Capricorn themes, being
Right.
in integrity with yourself, being in alignment, is what was part
Ambition.
of it. Yeah, like those are all driving your life forwards
Right.
in this
Right.
individual
Yeah.
direction. Yeah. What else?
What else?
Funny.
Well, what do you want to say about the square between Saturn and Jupiter?
Yeah, that's a good one. So this is another big theme. This square between Saturn and Jupiter is happening on the exact hit during Capricorn season is December 24th. You have a square. Now, let's just back up a little bit. A square is part of a process, and that process began on December 21st, 2020, when Jupiter
Mm,
and Saturn came together, and they came together at 0 degrees of Aquarius. And now here we are, several years later, and we have this square. So the tension between those things that started, the tension between Jupiter and Saturn is happening. And this one on the 24th is one of three. So it happened on August 19th, 2024. They squared each other. Then you have this one, which is the middle one. And then there's going to be another one in June. So this is a pretty big statement. But of what?
right. Of what?
Yeah, I mean, Jupiter represents expansion, going big, and it's in Gemini, so it's go big, go loud,
Mm,
and Saturn's like, nope, I'm in Pisces. Saturn's in the collective sign of Pisces, the necessity of developing empathy. compassion, but also having to deal with the fact that there's a lot of suffering going on. So there's a push and pull between those concepts. Saturn's sort of in this contraction state, and Jupiter's like, yeah, but I have all these great ideas about how
Right.
we can get out of that state. We're going to do this, we're going to do that.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, Jupiter's not happy in Gemini, and it's got a lot of big ideas and a lot of over talking, a lot of anxiety of the mind, I think, with how it plays in with Mercury here at the same time. And there really is something here about slowing down the mind because we don't really know where we're at yet. We don't really know the story that's
Yeah.
rolling out.
And you brought up in our pre-talk, Laurie, just about how much magical thinking there
Oh,
is going on. Like somehow there's going to be a magic wand and everything's going to be fine, or everything's going to go back to some other way, some normal way, whatever that means. And that's just not the other shoe hasn't dropped at this point. We don't even know. We're in the middle of some other processes, which we'll talk about in a second here.
yeah,
But the other shoe hasn't dropped. So I feel like the message here is, it'd be really easy to talk and come up with all these plans, but really you just need to kind of pull back, retract, and settle down into what you know to be real, the ground beneath your feet. What do you
right.
know to be
Capricorn.
tangible? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Capricorn. Letting go of, there's
Mhm.
no sign with less magical thinking than Capricorn. Capricorn does not have much tolerance for magical thinking. And I think it really is important for all of us to settle in and go within and do what we can to quiet that anxious mind that wants to go in all kinds of different directions to make itself feel better.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Mm.
that's great, Laura. Bringing Capricorn, exactly. It's Capricorn season. So that's really where our attention is focused on. And you're absolutely right. Like, this is where you just get down to the bedrock of
Yeah.
what feels true and real. That's really, the key piece.
And
Yeah.
okay, I mean we could go on about that, but I think the other thing that we might want to talk about, Jenny, is that we do have the opposition, the second opposition of Mars Pluto.
Yeah, we sure do. Don't want to miss
And
that.
yeah, we don't want to miss that. That's so important right now.
Yeah.
And first of all, we've got Mars is retrograde still. We've got this Mars retrograde going on. It made its first opposition. You got to realize that the planets are what make things happen. It's not the signs that make things happen, it's the planets. And when they come together is what really creates stuff happening. Now, Mars and Pluto are considered the malefics. They bring the most challenges to the table. And when they interact together, there's big things that can happen. Um, the first opposition between them before Mars went retrograde happened on November 4th, 3rd or 4th, whatever, a day or two before the election, right?
Yeah.
So there was that. And now this opposition happens on January 3rd,
Yeah.
which is also a significant time culturally around the election and all of that. Um, and then there's a third pass, which is what, in June or April?
It's April. I think it's
April.
April 26th. Yeah.
April. We don't know. This is a story that is playing out. We don't know. We know that there's a lot of challenge in it. There's a lot of difficulty. There's a lot of heat. There's a lot of um, cultural results or cultural stuff going on because it's Pluto. Pluto is not a personal planet. It's the farthest out that we use here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple other things. This is very important. I think this is one of the most dominant cycles right now of the story being told. One thing I just wanted to add on to, what Laurie's already said, which is simply that you have these big, slow planets, mainly Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune, and sometimes you include Saturn in that are moving slowly. And then when you have one of the faster moving planets happening, so Mars, in this case, then that's the trigger. So often the faster moving planet brings in the actual events on the ground that you're like, whoa, that was the big thing that actually changed, that
Mhm.
really kicked the Pluto metamorphosis into gear, you know. So Mars is really the
Yeah.
thing that it's the trigger point, right?
Right.
So it really like kicks it in. So it's really important for each of us to examine where that Mars is in our own chart, and see how it's unfolding on the world stage. And also check out our video. We did make a video about Mars retrograde for more information on that.
Mhm.
Um, but the other thing I really just want to add quickly is that we talked about the Jupiter Saturn square. Well, that started at zero Aquarius, and that's where
That's right.
Pluto is right now.
Yeah.
Pluto's at zero Aquarius. So this story is like, what was the expansion and contraction, the push and the pull that we felt back in 2020,
Huh.
which now is gotten into this, is gotten into a
Wow.
new place, and there's
Wow.
more
Wow.
stress because it's a square, and now Pluto's there. I mean, what does that say?
Wow. Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to contemplate. What does that say? You know,
yeah,
it's pinging that spot that was activated by that conjunction in 2020, late 2020. So,
yeah.
we all know where we were in late 2020. So, this could have a personal, activation in your own chart. If you've got planets right in those early degrees of Aquarius, you can certainly see some of it's impossible to see the big, big, big picture, but we know it's there and we can feel that connection. This is whatever began then with that push pull. You can think about, I don't want to go into a lot of political or cultural conversation here, but just the push pull of whether we wore masks or didn't wear masks in late
Mhm.
2020.
Mhm.
That was definitely a push pull. Some people go in one direction, and all that anxiety there. And now what's being activated there? Pluto's job is to empower us, and yet Pluto will destroy whatever is in the way of that necessary transformation to create that empowerment. So
Yeah.
there's something in that. There's something in that struggle in the culture that we were in the middle of in late 2020 that is now kind of blowing something up in order to change what's underground here.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really interesting.
It is. And you're right. It kind of, I agree with you. It has that kind of, there's a little bit of a, or a lot of an obliteration of things that clears the ground for new things to begin. And Pluto does hold that. Pluto's interesting though, because it can be tiny like a seed and then it grows into a giant tree, or it can do the other thing where it takes something big and buries it and hides it underground. So it kind of does, it has that potential to do both. But I think we can all agree that whatever your opinions or whatever, like this is a tumultuous time, and that this period right now of Capricorn season, like this is just a lot we don't know yet because we've already had in the US, you've had the election, and you can't help but compare it to the US because this ties in with the US's Pluto return and all of
Yeah.
that, which is a whole nother story. But basically, the story of the US is very prominent, and you can't avoid that. So we had that kind of, okay, we've had one hit, and now we're coming up on the second one, and it's like, well, what exactly that's going to be, and then April, so there'll be
Yeah.
another one, so we don't know. So a lot about the Capricorn season, that's why it's so
Yeah.
important to kind of go within and identify the personal integrity, identify, like, take some time alone, figure out what your plan is, figure out what your forward direction is and where it needs to go, and that's going to shift too. So
Yeah.
there you go, that's what it is.
Yeah, I think that's exactly why we have to really be careful with this Jupiter, wanting to come up with all this magical thinking and all these stories and all this conversation, quieting it down because we don't know. We're not going to know. We're not going to know.
Yeah,
So, developing your own internal integrity, settling down, looking
yeah,
inward, and taking care of each other is really what the job is during Capricorn season.
I agree. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's with Saturn and Pisces too. It's like that is what it is. That kindness, that care, that consideration, the
Yeah.
compassion.
Yeah.
That's what's the part of the integrity. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's go on to the list of the week by week.
Okay. Whew. Alrighty.
Whew. I'm exhausted already.
So yeah, when we were putting together the season, we were like, gosh, it's fairly complex this season. There's a lot of different energies going on. So hopefully we can shine a little light on some of that. Um, we're gonna start. We tend to break these down weekly, including by moon phase. So the first chunk of time is December 21st until that the 29th, basically, is what we'll look at.
Yeah.
And it's funny, we're back in that phase where you have the sun goes into a sign, and then we're immediately in the dark moon phase, the last
Yeah.
quarter phase, which is, that phase of it's getting darker and darker. So it really is signifying the inward spin, the need to kind of hunker down and work with that part of the moon phase. So it's not that outward, hey, energy. It really underscores, okay, we're going into Capricorn, and then you need to kind of go with it. Um,
The
so you have,
letting go sense of the
yeah,
last quarter. It's like time to start releasing.
yeah, letting go
You
of
know,
over socializing that Libra brings.
right, right. I want to just throw out for those of you who are really interested, take a screenshot of this and you'll have it to look at for the month to see what's happening day by day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I dare say that first chunk of time, there's a lot going on. You have the nodal square, like that we've just talked about at length, the sun squaring the Aries node in particular, but also the Libra South node. And then you have the square, the Jupiter Saturn square that we just talked about at length, and then Mercury immediately goes into lighting that square up and by opposing Jupiter. So there's the information overload that we've talked a lot about. And then the 27th is and here's reality. Here's the
Right.
smackdown. You thought you were telling some story yesterday, and today it's like, well, this is what's real. And that was magical thinking.
Right.
So that it's like fun. And then have that during the Balsamic moon. It's like you got to fold that into this. There's an inward process here. Um, and then Venus square Uranus. I mean, gosh,
Yeah, that's a wild card.
I like that. That's good. Yeah. That is the wild card. I like it.
Yeah, that really is. And that
Uh,
kind of brings in a whole different piece. It's like, okay, there's something unexpected around relationships maybe, but yeah, that's an interesting one. Watch that one because that is the wild card, I think.
yeah, that's like a deep piece of insight coming out of somewhere you never thought, especially during the Balsamic. Like pay attention to your intuition,
Yeah.
I would say.
Huh.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's quite the week.
Yeah, that is quite the week. And then the next week we start on Monday the 30th after, most people listening to this are probably celebrating some holiday. And on the 30th we come to the new moon, the day before the final day of the year.
Oh,
And that
doesn't
is
that
it. What'd you say?
I was gonna say that's perfect time to set New Year's resolutions, but only if you're gonna follow through with them. Don't set anything unachievable.
Yeah, really, because that new moon at 9 degrees Capricorn, you're probably, if you are someone who thinks about setting New Year's resolutions, no wonder they always go wrong because we're so serious. It's Capricorn, it's Capricorn. We're going to set up all the serious things that we're not going to necessarily want to do a month later. At any rate, the new moon is a time to set expectations and think about what you want to create for the year ahead. The Pluto sextiling the 31st, that's really nice. Pluto sextiling the North Node, that really supports any setting of resolutions because it really does provide an opportunity of bringing a lot of empowerment to the direction you're moving in.
Yeah.
I kind of like that one. And
Hmm.
then we get into the new year. And we've got on the 2nd of January, Venus entering Pisces, really allowing, beginning the process of bringing us into a softer place in terms of our values and maybe our relationships, being a little more compassionate with other people there. I like that. I like Venus moving into Pisces there, the second day of the year. And then the third, we've got that Mars opposing Pluto, and we'll see.
See what that
We'll
happens.
see what, and
Yeah,
obviously, if you're watching this, you probably understand these things aren't, it's not like one day and then it's done. This encompasses a certain
yeah,
um, block of time. And then on the 4th, the sun sextiling Saturn, what does that bring in? A little stability. It's
yeah,
like, that's like, just calm down, do your work. And then Mars trining the North Node is again offering the gift of energy toward your direction forward.
yeah.
Something along those lines.
Yeah, that's a really interesting week right there, I think, because there's a lot of empowerment in that week. There's a
Yeah,
lot of flow.
yeah,
I love Venus entering Pisces. Venus, it really loves to be in Pisces
yeah,
as a sort of a transcendent vibe to that, just like a uplifting. And then, like you said, Sun sextile Saturn, that's nice. That's an
yeah,
opportunity to create more support around what you need. And
yeah.
then the Mars trines North Node is like, and moving in the direction, bearing in mind Mars is retrograde. So forward movement is not necessarily the main point. But it
No, but
is
it also
certainly,
it also reminds us that this trine to the North Node happens 3 times as well.
yeah. Yeah, and it's galvanizing, it's galvanizing, even though it's talking more about an inward process than you might ordinarily want to
Right.
focus on. But yeah, and the Mars opposed Pluto, it's like we've already had the one. It's like there's a shock, there's a upset, there's a buried piece of information coming to light, there's a power grab. I mean, we know we know some of these, but that is what it represents. But it also represents an opposition brings in clarity.
Yeah.
I mean, what even if it's unpleasant.
Even if you don't like the clarity.
Yeah. But overall, that I don't know. There's quite a bit of flow to that
Mhm.
week before we get into the next one. What happens to the next one? Let's take a look here. So then we have the first quarter square in Aries,
Mhm.
so now there's a more personal attention on, your own personal pursuits and what's going on in your own personal actions. Though Mars is now back in Cancer. I mean, Mars is moving from Leo to Cancer that same day, which isn't that funny? It feels like a very deliberate, like, hey, fire, just kidding. Mars is going to move back into water that day. So instead of the moon in Aries being like, oh look, Mars is in Leo, let's blaze on, it's like, oh, Mars is in Cancer, now I have to deal with my feelings, and there's a
Right.
mutual reception there.
Right.
So feelings could be woo that day. That could be a
Yeah. Yeah.
pretty intense day.
Yeah,
In the
it's
deep
interesting
dive.
just thinking with Mars retrograde, it feels
Mhm.
like, with Mars in Leo, there's been all this, just activation of motion. And I think of, anger with the Mars opposing Pluto. And now it's done being angry and it's just going to go in a corner and cry.
But also be very reactive and the potential for resentment. I also think about that. But also, Mercury squares Neptune that day, so
Oh,
there's just
yeah.
that's not clarity. That is definitely not. That's the opposite. So there's a fogginess associated. So I think the sixth is a
Ah,
day to just really just kind of flag that day as like there could be some emotional volatility to that day. It's a good day to just be aware of that. So
yes.
if you do end up feeling that way, you're like, oh yeah, I remember this. So I just need to remember that and pause and take a deep breath, when I'm feeling those things. It can really help you. I know it sounds cliche, but it's true.
Mm.
And then we carry on and Mercury shifts gears. Mercury goes from this exuberant, excited Sagittarius and now it's in Capricorn and it's becoming so your mindset is kind of following in like, ooh, I need to really get serious here. I need to start focusing on these things. And then you have to, this is another case where the nodes this are being affected.
Although
So
it says Mercury square Gnosis.
Gnosis, some kind of special holiday, the Gnosis day. On Gnosis Day, but this is another case of like that serious somber mindset is part of your integrity, is part of
Yeah.
looking in the direction you want to go in, because then something very interesting happens on the 11th.
Hmm.
And that's the day that the nodal axis shifts completely out of Aries and Libra and goes into Pisces and Virgo. So that is a major departure. So from now on, instead of this independent, decisive direction of the North Node in Aries, now we're looking at collective concerns, kindness, compassion. Can I be forgiving? Where do I need to soften?
Mhm.
Where, and also, the desire for escapism increases. The desire to run the hell away from whatever you're worried about happening, to drown one's sorrows, in the proverbial barrel of whiskey. So this is there's always the spectrum. So, but that's a huge shift, and that
That's a
shift is going
huge
to be with
shift.
us for a while,
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
next year and a half or so.
And hopefully we will make a video on that shift because that's a really fascinating one that we're going to be with for what, 18, 19 months.
Yeah, and it ties in with the eclipse cycle. And this is where, if you want a little more information, before we make a longer, more depth video, there's a short video about the nodes, just some of the basics. Yeah, and then Mars trines Neptune. Again, we're in water signs. That's talk about crying. That's a big day for a flood and a release. And then we come
Mm.
into the full moon in Cancer, and sun trines Uranus. That sort of brings a lot of energy as well to that full moon.
That's I love that. That Sun trine Uranus can really be a good, that can be a really sweet one
Yeah,
or exciting.
yeah, it's something new. It's an awakening, like a refreshment. Like, okay, things.
Celebrate the full
Yeah.
moon.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then after that, why don't you? I don't know, like the Venus square Jupiter kind of reiterates the Jupiter Saturn square.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And
What do
then
you
I
think
think
about?
that Sun opposed Mars on the 15th. That's an interesting one too, because it really pushes us to pay clear attention to what is going on with that retrograde Mars, which is what now in Cancer.
Yeah,
That's going to really be a time to consider what house in your natal chart, what house holds Cancer, the polarity between Cancer and Capricorn, and really think about how you use your energy. How do you use Mars, especially as it's going through Cancer? Yeah, that's an important day, I think.
yeah. And I mean, also from the Mars retrograde cycle perspective, that's the bang midpoint.
That's right.
So I think that
That's right.
you know, it's possible that's going to represent an energy shift, because it's going to suddenly thrust us into the second half of the retrograde cycle of Mars, which is usually markedly different than the first half.
Mhm.
And so it really, I think I kind of flagged that January 15th as like an important turning point in that Mars retrograde cycle. And again, watch that video. But it is going from Leo to Cancer, as we've talked about. It's happening in this Capricorn season. So this is an important time to think about your underlying motivations, think about work on your emotional reactivity, like notice where, if that's happening, notice where and why, and kind of dig into it.
Mhm.
It's going to be helpful.
Mhm.
And then
Interesting.
we come towards the end. We have the Sun sextile Neptune, Venus conjunct Saturn. So that's the beginning of a new Venus cycle. And the Sun sextiles the North Node. So this is sort of like a
Mhm.
check. This is sort of like a, hey, how did you do?
Right.
How have you done with your Capricorn integrity and your alignment and your solitude and all those things,
Mm.
before the Sun moves into Aquarius?
Yeah. And that last day, I think I think it's right before the sun enters Aquarius, Mercury sextiles both Saturn and Venus.
Yeah.
So there's some opportunity to really think it through. Like that whole what you were just saying about how did you do? That just really reiterates that. So
Mhm.
that's the month, and we are going to move from here into the individual impacts. We're not going to try to cover a whole ton of all of these pieces. We have decided that we're going to focus on the Capricorn season itself, as far as where Capricorn is in the individual charts and how the nodes um, are impacting us as well.
Nice.
So if you've got Aries rising, we're starting with you as always. And one thing I want to say before we dive into these individual impacts is that there's so much going on in this season. What I really hope you'll do is go back and listen to specifically the video that we did about Mars retrograde, because that's really going to impact this season a lot. And at this point, we're not going to discuss that for the individual pieces. What we have added to each individual slide here is the North Node. So, what we're thinking about for those of you who have Aries rising, the focus of Capricorn season is in your 10th house. That's where you have Capricorn. That's where, in general, in your life, the 10th house, your career, your social reputation is a very important and serious area of your life. During this time, you are really in a position where you want to be looking at kind of pulling back and taking some time to yourself to contemplate your career, to contemplate your own level of integrity in your career or how you're seen in the public in some way. Since the summer of 2023, the North Node has been going through your first house, and there has been a lot of development throughout that time around, for you, really around developing the courage to be truly authentic in your personality. And there's a link here between your courage to embrace your authentic personality and your integrity in who you are in the outer world through your career or your social reputation. And this is something that's really being highlighted right now, is just how much have you learned? How are you able to utilize what you've learned about your own personality and how that applies to you being more ambitious and more authentic and having more integrity in your outer world.
Nice. Yeah, I think you summarized that beautifully. I'll just reiterate quickly the benefit to you with Aries rising is just to really think about. I mean, these are the two most powerful houses in the whole
Mhm.
chart. So just think about that connection between who you are and the difference that you can make
Mhm.
through your professional life. And again, that can be public life, professional slash public life. So that's really what you're looking at, and the things that happen to you in your work life are the things that can cue you for your understanding about whether or not you're in alignment, whether you are in integrity with your higher ambition, your goals, your plans that you wish to make. So this is a potent one for you. This is very important.
Yeah. I like that. That's really interesting. As you were talking, I remembered someone specific, and it's like, oh, I see it. That's great. That's beautiful.
Yeah,
Okay, let's
exciting.
move on to the next one.
All right, so those of you with Taurus rising, here we are in Capricorn season. And just a quick note, we have just decided we're really talking about Capricorn season here, and we're talking about the nodal axis in Aries. There's a lot of other things going on in this season, but we just want to get focused here on what are the sort of actions that you can take. So those of you with Taurus rising, the season takes place in your ninth house of your worldly experience, your wisdom that you have here. And there's this suggestion that you're rather serious about your worldly
Mhm.
philosophy, or you may have some, I was just thinking, you may have some ambition towards things like traveling or to gather these higher experiences that really expand your philosophy. So there's something about that. Every Capricorn season shines a light in this ninth house of yours. So that's always the same. But this one in particular, you're really being asked to get clear about what's, go within, withdraw a bit so that you can have an understanding of what it is that you really value that forms the basis of your philosophy, and the way you express yourself to other people. So in the meantime, that work is very closely tied to the place where the node is. We have put the North Node in Aries on this chart. So what you need to understand is as you do this background work around your integrity that Capricorn season brings in, you are really changing the trajectory, the direction that you personally are going in, that has to do with your hidden patterns, your subconscious patterns, perhaps, 12th house topics. So there's a question here that's being posed around you getting a deeper understanding of who you are as an individual. And it's taken a lot
Mm.
of courage to clear off some of the debris, to kind of dig deep and have a deeper understanding of who you are behind the scenes, who you can show up as. That is kind of the big question in play as a
Mm.
Taurus rising person. And so the thing you want to ask is how are these two areas related? What is the wisdom that you need to kind of dig into, the world philosophy that you have, and how does that interplay with your behind the scenes, hidden from view patterns?
Mm.
It's kind of the key question.
It's interesting, that North Node has been moving through your 12th house since the summer of 2023, and you've learned so much about yourself. I think part of this point in time is really showing you how the courage to go deep and learn about yourself is allowing you to show up with a lot more integrity in terms of your worldview, your philosophy, and all of that. I really like how this plays together. And the only other thing I want to say is I just want to remind you if you want more information here, because there's so much more going on in this Capricorn season than just this piece that we're talking about right here, is first listen to the beginning part of the video if you can. We get kind of geeky, but if you understand enough astrology to follow that, that would be helpful. But also go back and listen to the video that we did, which we will link below, about the Mars retrograde, because that is impacting this Capricorn season so much as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. We're going to move on to folks who have Gemini rising. Now, if you've got Gemini rising, the Capricorn season is shining its light in your eighth house. So, the first thing we want to understand is what is the eighth house? The eighth house is a really deeply important house. It's a very significant and deep area where we encounter the boundaries of other people, the issues that other people might lay at our feet, other people's baggage. We can think of it that way. Um, the eighth house is really where we learn to navigate ourselves in the face of what other people bring to us, difficult issues. Um, if you've got Gemini rising, this is a very important, serious area for you. And what you really are looking at during this time, we've talked about this Capricorn season as a time to kind of pull away from all the hustle and bustle and craziness that's going on out there and spend some time really getting clear about your own level of integrity. And for you with Gemini rising, it's your integrity in how you manage yourself in the face of other people's stuff, in how you set boundaries. You really want to look at your own kindness in that area. um, the other thing that we've added here for Capricorn season, even though there's a lot of different things we could have added, and please go back and listen to the Mars retrograde video. But what we have added here is the North Node, because there is a very important interplay going on during Capricorn season between the North Node and the beginning of Capricorn season. Since the summer of 2023, those of you with Gemini rising have been learning a lot about how you interact with community or others who support you. You've maybe really learned to be braver than you might feel in terms of seeking support from others. As you've learned that, the courage that it has taken for you to seek out community, create community, whatever it is really supporting your integrity in managing and navigating other people's stuff.
Mm.
What do you have to add there, Jenny?
Yeah, I think just thinking about the interplay between that, like what you just said, your ability to set boundaries. I think the danger here could be setting walls. And you don't want walls with people because a Capricorn can throw up walls, you know?
Yeah.
So you want to hold yourself in integrity means keeping yourself open and available enough to other people's stuff
Ah,
that you're not shutting them down. But as you work towards mastering that skill, and I mean that in each and every encounter where things get triggered, each of those there's an opportunity to do that dance. Then you're really, it's going to enable you to step up into this more leadership capacity. I mean, I think anybody with
mm,
Gemini rising, you've got Aries in the 11th house. So you have this leadership capacity in front of groups. Now that can play in all kinds of different ways. You know, it can be more subtle. It doesn't have to necessarily be completely overt. It depends on your chart. But that's the interplay. You know, as you hold yourself to doing this dance of how open can I be to people versus how, you know, how stiff does the boundary need to be,
mm.
it enables you to step more into that leadership role. So that's sort of the dance. And I would wager that during this Capricorn season, you'll have multiple opportunities to test that. You know, you're going
Wow.
to get multiple, and some of those opportunities are going to be empowering and they're going to feel like you did it well in this great flow. And others of those you might stop you a bit short and be like, ooh, I'm still trying to figure that one out.
Mm,
But that's kind of the whole season gives you this testing ground.
mm,
So
mm.
that's what I have to add. So yeah, nice.
I love it that you just brought up mastery. You know, wherever Capricorn is, that's the whole thing is mastery without s- walls that won't let anything permeate. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really nice that you brought
Yeah.
that up. Okay, so we're going to move on now to folks who have Cancer rising.
All right, so those of you with Cancer rising, Capricorn season always ends up landing in your partnership house, the seventh house. So that means every Capricorn season, there's some sort of focus on whoever you partner with. Now, remember, this can be your spouse and those intimate partners, but it also can be business partners. It can also be any one-on-one conversation you find yourself in during, especially
Mm.
it's like the holidays. I'm just kind of thinking about that. But every Capricorn season, you are sort of asked to look at how do I show up in partnerships? You know, how do I handle my partnerships? Do I have integrity? Am I following through with the things that I said? Am I meeting my own needs while also meeting the needs of my perceived needs, I'll say, of the relationship? Those are the kinds of questions that tend to come up. And I think it's kind of funny because if you are someone who celebrates the holidays, it's probably likely that you might be spending time with your significant other's family. So plenty
Mm.
of places to test out how you're really showing up and how you're really holding to the things that you think are vitally important. This is also a very serious area of life for you, so you take your partnerships very seriously. So that also might come into play a little bit too. Like, yeah, go ahead and be serious, but you know you don't want to be overly serious either, and that's part of how do you hold the balance. So that's what the season brings up. Now, Lori and I have included the Aries North Node in here because this North Node has something to say about a direction we need to move in with courage, probably in our professional lives. The 10th house can also just simply be how you show up in public. It's easy to say, oh, your professional life. But that is where the focus is of the North Node. So, in other words, while you're figuring out that integrity piece to do with your partnerships, you are also, in the bigger scheme of things, figuring out how you need to move forward in your profession. What decisions do you need to make?
Mm.
What courage do you need to employ in order to step up somehow in your professional life? And there's a tension between these two areas, and that's the question: what's the tension between the professional life and the partnership life? Like what's going on there? But they very much inform each other. They inform, hey, if you have integrity here, that's what you need to bring into the more professional part, and vice versa. So um, Yeah, I will digress and pass this to you, Lori.
Well, I just, thinking about that North Node has been moving through that 10th house since the summer of 2023. So for folks with Cancer rising, you've been really developing. There's been an insistence and a push for you to develop a certain level of bravery or courage around some actions that you have had to take in your career. And so that's been a big focus. And here, this is kind of the culminating point when that North Node reaches the Aries point and squares the sun as it comes into Capricorn. It's like there is a way in which the courage that you have taken on, the work that you've done, is really clearly impacting your ability to be serious and have integrity and really show up and make things happen in your partnership. So I think that those of you with Cancer rising, yeah, the more work you've done in that area of your career, developing bravery and all of that, the more you are able to settle in and quiet down and accept the fact that you've done the work and you've got a solid, it has solidified, helped solidify your relationships.
Nice.
Hmm.
Awesome.
I think I know someone with that.
I don't know who you mean.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I
I
I
love
could
this.
make that
Yeah.
personal, but I won't.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I just think what's interesting too, and this is the final thing I'll say about it, is just that you're going to get multiple opportunities to test this out during the season because there's multiple ways in which this little pattern keeps showing up.
Yeah.
So it's a good testing ground.
Yeah, and there's multiple relationships that it'll show up in. You can
Yeah.
think of that seventh house as, I think of it, the seventh house more and more as contractual relationships. So business partnerships, spouses or people who come to you and pay you, or you go to people
Yeah.
and pay them. It's contractual kind of one-on-one relationships. So yeah, there'll be
Yeah.
multiple opportunities to see and to see how is my integrity in this relationship? And how does that relate to the work I've done to, bravely move forward in my career? It's interesting to think
Yeah.
about it. Okay.
Yeah, and it's public too, right? It's
Yeah.
the seventh house, so
Yeah.
public relationships.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're going to move on to people who have Leo rising. So if you've got Leo rising, the Capricorn season shows up every year. The focus of the Capricorn season is the sixth house. And the sixth house, it's an interesting house. It really is about our day-to-day lives, the day-to-day routines that support our work life, our home life, that support our lives. It's how we take care of ourselves. It will include things like, how you exercise or how you feed yourself, or, if you sit on a meditation mat every day or not. It's your day-to-day routines that basically make up your lifestyle. So
Mhm.
this is an area for people with Leo rising. This is a very serious area of their lives. And at this point with Capricorn season and the way it's playing out, it's really important for you to take some time, some solitary time to really look at, question, and consider how how good you feel about the lifestyle you have created in terms of those day-to-day routines. Do you
Mhm.
feel like you are in integrity with yourself? That's a big question of Capricorn season. Are you in integrity with yourself in terms of your lifestyle? Now, we have included um, this at this Capricorn season, we've included the North Node, and one of the things, these two play together and inform each other. The North Node has been in your ninth house since the summer of 2023. You've been really actively developing your worldview. In some manner, there's been an activation of the development of your worldview, whether that be the development through education, through travel, through exploration of ideas, your philosophies. There's been some way that you have taken on an individual worldview that may not be popular with everybody around you, but you're working on developing the courage of your own individual worldview, and that is really informing this serious path of your lifestyle. So you want to really think about how these two inform each other, how the work you've done on your worldview enables you to be more authentic and more in integrity in your lifestyle choices.
Mm.
I can think of all kinds of just simple little ways that that could play out. You
Yeah.
know, your worldview, you might have taken on a new worldview that that took some courage to say, I'm going to be a vegetarian.
Yeah.
Something as simple as that. And then that informs your lifestyle choices.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And it's interesting. No, I agree because in that exchange, it's kind of like the ninth house where the North Node is. So the philosophy change, that's a little bit more, that's part of your self-expression. That's a personal
Right.
sort of choice and a philosophy. But the sixth house is like, you got to put it in practice.
Right.
So your vegetarian example is really good because you might be led to, hey, I don't want to harm animals, and then you've got to do that on a tangible level, and then vice versa, your
Yeah.
mindset has to switch. And so it's the way you kind of put your critical thinking into practice is what this is about. And because you have
That's
Capricorn
right.
there, it's really important that you back up your philosophy with your actions. Like I think there's a huge interplay between those two things.
Yeah.
And furthermore, this Capricorn season, because of the number of times that North Node gets pinged by Capricorn planets, you're going to have multiple opportunities to kind of suss it out, push it around, prod your new ideas and try new things, try something new, try it on, see if it fits into your sort of ethos, right? I mean,
That's great.
I don't know, there's something like that's what's interesting. And some of those things are very empowering, and some of them are more challenging and difficult and trying to get your head around what it is you're actually trying to do.
That's
So,
interesting. That's
yeah,
great. Let me just add
yeah,
one other thing. You know,
yeah.
we picked the node to put in here, but there's so much else going on during the season. I would really encourage everyone to go back and listen to the video we did about Mars retrograde because that's very
Yeah.
activated here as well.
Yeah, and it's gonna bring in the emotional layer. So watch that video.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to folks with Virgo rising.
Okay, so those of you with Virgo rising, you have Capricorn in your fifth house. So let's talk about the fifth house a little bit. I love the fifth house. The fifth house is like where you get to play. It's where you take risks and you try something new, and it's an extension of your self-expression. So it really is an extension of you. It's a place where you kind of push out into the world and kind of try something different. And all of that time, you're doing it with your at its rawest form, your love, because the fifth house really has something to say where you give of yourself, where you give love. That's what it is making a big statement about. So it's kind of this idea. I always think of it as like pouring yourself into something. And
Mhm.
with Capricorn here, you've got something very serious that you want to pour yourself into. There is a depth here. There's a need for solitude as a form of your creative self-expression. And I think on kind of a simple level, this is like, this is just like schedule time to do your art. Like just schedule the time. I mean, Capricorn's a master at scheduling time. So
Mhm.
just, that's one of the messages is very serious, and it's a little bit hard to square seriousness with joy. But at the same time, if you don't take the time to do the joyful pursuits, they don't happen. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the beauty of this
Mhm.
setup. And Capricorn season is really highlighting that. Like, are you in integrity with the way you give of yourself? Are you giving too much of yourself to something? Are you not giving enough? Are you holding something back? These are some of the questions you might ask yourself. And ask yourself, what are your creative outlets? That's a very important thing, I think, for every human being. So those are the questions that kind of come to light. Now, Laurie and I have included the North Node on these charts because there is a push and pull going on with that nodal axis. And so, in other words, while you're doing all these integrity things around your creative stuff, what you're also doing is learning how to handle other people's baggage. You are stepping up into a more courageous way of handling the deeper, complicated layers of your relationships. I mean, that's what the eighth house symbolizes. And having Aries here, this North Node in Aries here, has really suggested that you've had to step up in a new way. You've had to kind of, get over your fears, and just step into this level of like, nope, I'm going to step up. I'm going to say what I need to say. I'm going to set this boundary that I need to set with this person. I'm going to ask for some things that I really need in this relationship. I mean, those are some of the things that might come up. And so then you're
Hmm.
thinking about how do these two places play with each other? How does your ability to give love with integrity affect your ability to set the right boundaries with people and their difficult baggage and emotional issues? I mean,
Hmm.
that's the kind of playoff. Yeah. So what do you have, Dad, Lori?
Well, it is really interesting to think about it. The North Node has been moving through Aries since the summer of 2023. So you can think about that as the period of time that you've really been working hard to courageously set boundaries, to be more courageous in how you are willing to interact with other people's stuff that impacts you. And so, I think of this period of time with that node right on the Aries point as sort of a culmination. How have you done with that? And how does the work that you've put in there impact and support, really, ultimately, your ability to do your creative work? And yeah, I loved how you talked about that. It's an interesting thing to have Capricorn in the fifth house, thinking of the fifth house as the house of fun. Well, for you with Virgo rising, fun might be getting up at 5 a.m. to do your creative work. That might not sound like fun to someone who has Leo in the fifth house, but to someone who has Capricorn in the fifth house, hard work, effort is going to be fun. And the courage that you've really used to develop your ability to set boundaries is really going to support the ability to have fun doing hard work.
Yeah. When you put it that way, though, it makes tons of sense because both of these houses ultimately are concerned with resources, your creative resources, and then your shared resources. So how do those play tennis with each other?
Oh, I love that you brought that up.
Yeah,
Yes, that's
yeah,
very, very good. And that makes my mind go in 10 other directions, but I'll slow it
oh, time
down.
to move on.
Time to move on. The only other thing I do want to say is for everyone, and I really just want to reiterate this, there is so much going on during the season. Please go back and listen to the video that we did about the Mars retrograde. There's a lot of things we could have included in this video, and we chose to do the North Node. And yeah, there's a lot going on right now. So enjoy.
Yeah, it's a lot of layers.
Enjoy the holiday season. And we're going to move on to folks who have Libra rising.
This is you.
Oh, this is for me to talk about. I got confused. Okay, so for those of you with Libra rising, Capricorn is in your fourth house. So, the fourth house is home and family. So, Capricorn season really brings your attention to the area of your home and family. This is an area in your life that you take very seriously. Home, family, it's a serious area for you, and a place where it's extremely important that you work with from a place of authentic integrity. Wherever Capricorn is a serious area that you need integrity to manage. Um, so we want to think about, first of all, during Capricorn season, take time alone. Don't try to fill this holiday season, this Capricorn season, with all kinds of activity, which, with some of the Jupiter stuff that's going on this month, it might be easy to do, but you want to make sure that you take some quiet alone time to contemplate your level of integrity around your home and family. Now, the other thing we've included here is the North Node. And with the North Node in your seventh house in Aries, these two areas are so important to look at together. Since the summer of 2023, you've been really working on developing a certain level of bravery or courage around how you are in relationship to a partner, a business partner, something in that area of partnership. And, I think of this point when the nodes are at the Aries point, and when the sun goes in, it is at a cardinal point as well, that this is really a point to really examine how the work you have done in relationship is able to support your integrity in family.
Mm,
Huh.
nice.
Bring more into that. I think I'm missing something.
Well, I was this was going in the the more psychological component, which is the fourth house being your emotional balance and foundation. So on an individual level. So and what you just said just totally made sense to me with that. Like just this idea that as you have this deep integrity with yourself at your deepest foundational emotional level, it's going to allow you to show up as this partner, as a partner who needs independence, but a partner who's also going to own their own path while being in relationship with you, and so I think there's a really strong connection between that, like really just and because Saturn, the ruling planet, is in Pisces, I just really see it as you got to be kind to yourself,
Mm,
so setting this foundation of empathy towards self, having that, and then that's what enables you to just do your partners differently, like do your partnerships differently. So I just made a funny joke, but anyway. um, so I just think this is giving you an opportunity to really reformulate the way that you handle your partnerships,
mm,
in a way that's ultimately just going to serve you better. And during this Capricorn season, just this few weeks of time, you're going to have multiple chances to kind of road test that, because there's a lot of ways in which that keeps getting pinged. And some of those ways are incredibly empowering. And some of them are going to be a bit more difficult and kind of challenge the way that you want to think about things.
mm.
But either way, it's a great time to really kind of suss out what's that foundation going to be and how solid is it for you. And that's what you
That's
want.
great. That's great. And again, let me just remind you, there's so much going on during this season. Please go back and re-listen or listen if you haven't listened to the video we did about the Mars retrograde, because that's going to be so crucial during this time as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Okay.
really adds another layer. So,
Yeah,
yep.
it does. Okay, so we're going to move on now to folks with Scorpio rising.
Alrighty, so those of you with Scorpio rising, you have Capricorn in your third house, according to whole sign houses. And so this Capricorn season, like every Capricorn season, really brings up a bunch of stuff about the way you communicate. And I really like this one because this is really just, understanding, every time you speak, every time you communicate with somebody, every time you interact with someone in your local environment, that you're using your voice. And for you, it's very, very important that you are deeply in integrity with what comes out of your mouth,
Hmm.
that you really are expressing with seriousness, because you have Capricorn here, the seriousness that comes through your ability to communicate. And so it is extra super vitally important for those of you with Scorpio rising to really have a clear understanding of what is it that you want to communicate before you launch in. And this Capricorn season just has this thing where it's kind of lighting us all up and spinning us all out a little bit. And you're really going to want to give yourself full permission to pause, to slow down before you're about to say something, and really just check yourself. And I mean, you have the natural propensity to do that as a Scorpio rising person,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of other stressors going on. So that's kind of the keynote of how to just really make sure you take enough time alone. The third house is also siblings. So it might be that you want to be extra cautious around how you voice your things with your sibling, or maybe you have a sibling that you really jive with and you really adore, and they are a support to you in this process. So there's a couple ways that could play out. Um, we have also included the North Node in Aries in these charts, and that is because it's so prominent right at the Aries point. It's making a pretty big statement throughout this whole Capricorn season. So there's something here that is making a statement about your lifestyle, the way that even as I'm saying this, I'm thinking something that comes to mind is you might have had some health issues.
Mm.
You might have had to step forward with some courage and change your habits and change your behavior and confront something that could be a health issue. At any rate, wherever Aries is a place where you have to have a lot of courage. So during this Capricorn season, you are being asked to kind of look at that. Like, where have you made a direction change in how you handle your day-to-day behaviors, how you eat, how you sleep, how you exercise. Those are all things that you want to look at, and make sure that it's working well with the way you are expressing your voice. So something about asking for what you need in terms of your lifestyle here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about that, how those two areas relate to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, the lifestyle and the immediate environment, how they relate to each other. It's interesting. And yeah, the North Node has been moving through that sixth house, the area of your lifestyle and routine, since summer of 23. So you've changed probably a lot of things. You've taken on a certain amount of bravery and courage around making changes in your lifestyle. And, it may be those very changes that you are being challenged to talk about in a way that is in integrity. Um, yeah, that could be an interesting thing to think about during the holiday season. Bringing your ideas, your powerful, strong new ideas about lifestyle changes to your immediate family in some way, your siblings or whatever. You're going to really want to spend some time alone contemplating how that's going to be received, and really bringing integrity to the table with that.
It
Yeah.
also occurs to me too that one way to express yourself is silence. I'm not suggesting stonewalling people. That's different. That's a bit more passive aggressive. But I just mean simply choosing, I don't need to talk about that right now, is equally as powerful. Um,
Especially with all this
yeah,
Jupiter and Gemini thing going on.
yeah, I know.
It's really interesting. I feel like
Yeah.
one of the biggest lessons I've had to learn in my life is when to keep my mouth shut. Not
It
that
is,
that
it's
has anything to
important.
do with this, but sometimes
Hmm.
sometimes that is very important. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah, the only last thing I want to say to those of you with Scorpio rising is, because there's so much going on during this period of time, please go back and listen to the Mars retrograde video as well, because that's so activated right now. And then we're going to move on to folks who have Sagittarius rising. So for those of you with Sagittarius rising, Capricorn season is illuminating the second house. The second house is the area in the chart that relates to how we value ourselves. It relates to money, resources, self-worth. Yeah, those things. Okay. So for people with Sagittarius rising, this is an area that is very, very important to you. With Capricorn in this house, you take your money and your resources and your self-worth very seriously. Now, during this season, you're going to want to really give yourself permission, even in the midst of all the hustle and bustle and kind of craziness of the season. You're going to really want to take time to go off, spend some time alone, um, and really think about issues of integrity in how you use your resources. Since we're in the middle of holiday season, Money might be a big part of this. You might really need to um, slow down in what other people's expectations of your spending might be. And when I say that, I'm looking at this. We added the nodes in here, the North Node in Aries, in your fifth house. We added that to the picture because these things are so important to look at together right now as they form a square aspect just at the end of the North Node's passage through Aries. Since 2023, summer of 2023, you've been developing a certain level of courage and determination and really making some big changes in how you give of yourself. How, the fifth house is really more than anything, it's how we give of ourselves in a big way. It's how we give love, it's how we give out of our creativity. So, how these two would work together, think about all that you've learned about how you give of yourself and use that learning since the summer of 2023 to really inform you of how you're spending your money right now during this season. I think there's a real interplay there. That fifth house can include our children, our love affairs. Is it really in your own integrity to spend what your kids think you should spend on them? I don't know. Those are just some of the things that come to mind, but you really want to think about how these two play out together. Huh.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the key to this is like, you're doing those Capricorn things, the integrity of the second house, during this whole season. And I think it is, when you look at the two together, in my mind, these are both resource houses. The second house is your personal resources. So yes, your money, but also, something that's occurring to me here with having Capricorn in your second house, one of your resources, or it might be about time and the way that you give of yourself through time. And that was something that just kind of popped in my mind, and this relationship between, really the second house is like, what do you even have to give? What are your resources? What value do you have to contribute to anything that you're part of? And then the fifth house is just the pouring out of pouring that love out. So they're really tightly tied together, and
Mhm.
this is a really important time to take stock of what your resources are, what you have available to give, what you're able to give.
Right.
And some of that can be time, like, do you have the time to participate in, certain things you've set yourself up for, and really just checking yourself on that level. And I think if you can bring the two into balance, you really have something. You really have an ability to powerfully give of yourself without running your resources dry. And
Mhm.
that's the kind of the key of what you're trying to do here. So this one's very personal. I think if this is all, these are both underneath the surface. These
Yeah.
are personal things
Yeah.
you're trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, and
Absolutely.
you'll have a lot of time to kind of decide during this Capricorn season what this is about, because it's going to get pinged on a few different levels throughout the season. And also, as Laura has been saying, do watch our Mars retrograde video, because that has more information about the emotional layers of what's going on during this time frame. So check it out.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to move on then to folks with Capricorn rising.
Alrighty, so those of you with Capricorn rising, this Capricorn season, really brings the focus right onto you. Every Capricorn season is about your first house, because that's by definition what you have here. So every Capricorn season, you are really getting an opportunity to look at how you move around in the world, how you carry your sense of integrity with you into everything that you do. Your overall life direction of being, of a person of stature, to be somebody with gravitas, to walk in the room and, be this authority. Whether or not you feel that on the inside, this is part of your destiny and your path. So every Capricorn season, that's what's being illuminated. So that's kind of heavy. It also refers to the image that you project, the first house. So even if, like I said, you don't feel like you're particularly an authority, it doesn't matter, because everyone else thinks that you are. So, this is a really important time for you to just witness that and hold that and develop a deeper layer of self-awareness, a deeper layer of authenticity of what you carry as you move around in the world. So that's kind of the keynote. We also have put in these North Node pictures. Why? Because the North Node is very prominent. It's very close to the very beginning of Aries. So it's making a loud statement. And for you, it's making a statement about a process you've been involved in since 2023 about being more courageous in your home life, stepping up to the plate in a new, bold, daring way that perhaps you hadn't been able to do before, and own yourself in a new way in your family structure. So, this could be your family of origin. This can be literally in your home life. Maybe there's a construction project going on in your home where you have to kind of step up and exercise more authority. There could be something like that going on. But it also can be extremely personal and about your emotional foundation, and that maybe you secretly know how you have bravely stood up and created a new foundation, and other people may not know. But rest assured, it's going to come out during this Capricorn season because you have Capricorn in the first house. So everything that you're doing to go in a new direction in your emotional foundation is going to show up in the way that you direct yourself through the Capricorn rising. So something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I like that. It's really interesting because you clearly, yeah, since the summer of 2023, you've been learning a lot about how you have to take on your own individual power or strength in your home, in your family, in whatever way that is. You want to think about this period of time, this Capricorn season, in some way as a culmination of that process that supports you in showing up as that authority, that supports you in having the kind of integrity in your own personality, how you take action out in the world. You've grown a lot during this period of time, and this is really able to support your your showing up in with a lot of integrity. So take some time by yourself, take some time alone to really contemplate the depth of this change. And the only other thing we want to leave you with, those of you with Capricorn rising, is go back and listen to the video about Mars retrograde because we chose to include the node here, but there's so many other things going on. And the other one that's really, really important to be aware of during this time is the Mars retrograde. So at least get in there. There's the timestamps listed so you can go directly to your rising sign to listen to that. Okay?
Great.
Okay. Now we're going to move on to folks who have Aquarius rising. For those of you with Aquarius rising, Capricorn season shines its light in your 12th house. Now, the 12th house is the area of life. It's an interesting one because it's really what goes on behind the scenes, under the curtain or behind the curtain, um, underground. It's the area, I think of it as your unconscious psychological processes or your hidden spiritual understandings. It's a very interesting area. With Aquarius rising, you have Capricorn in that house. This is an area that is very serious to you and an area that it's really important. Wherever Capricorn, it's so important that we have integrity and are willing to um, work hard in that area.
Mhm.
One of the problems with Capricorn is we can close ourselves off or build walls too high. And with Aquarius rising, you know, well, there's been a lot going on in Capricorn for a long time. So for most of you, it's unlikely that you've not paid attention. Let's put it that way. You've done a lot of work, probably, in this area over the last some years. And it's really important that you really hold a line of integrity within your own internal sense of self. Um, and that's where there's a light being shown during this time. you want to make sure, especially with Capricorn being in that 12th house, you want to make sure during this season that you spend some time alone, that you really spend some time looking inward and making sure that you're working with that area in a significant manner. Now, we've also included the North Node here, and we could have included other things, but this is what we chose to include because it's really highlighting a process that's been going on since the summer of 2023. For you, it's been a process of learning to use your voice in a more outward, direct, courageous manner.
Mm.
It may have something to do with your siblings or your immediate environment, your neighborhood, but in some way, using your voice, being courageous enough to use your voice. This is the culmination of what's been being developed here since the summer of 2023. And that development, that ability to more courageously use your voice now than you could a year and a half ago is really helping support the integrity of your internal understanding of yourself.
Mm. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, this I think it's gosh, everything you said, it's like you've covered a lot of ground and it's great. And I think what's kind of funny about these two areas of life, the 12th and the third house, I mean, a key word for me for both of them is they're both concerned with learning. The third house is concerned with the sort of nuts and bolts of learning, how you use the language, right?
Right.
And then the 12th house is this deep, expansive, intangible spiritual learning. So, what's really cool about bringing these two areas of life together is the ability to speak about, in a concrete way about these deep spiritual things. Like, so your voice is being dramatically
Mhm.
empowered at this time because of your understanding. So, this is a very important time, just as Laurie said, to take time alone to kind of, look, you've already gone through a leaving no stone unturned process for years about your own unconscious patterns. And now during Capricorn season, you're able to kind of mull those over and consider how you want to speak about them because you really are bringing the voice of wisdom. You
Mhm.
can speak about these topics in a way that not many other people can. And so
Mhm.
you're kind of bringing the total transcendent, non-ordinary states of consciousness to an ordinary commonplace conversation.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh,
That's
so that
great.
that's kind of what this brings. So anyway, it's pretty cool. I like this one. I like thinking about these two areas of life being linked together, and you're gonna have a
Yeah.
lot of time to play with it through these few weeks of Capricorn season because it'll keep coming up
Yeah. It'll
from
keep
different,
coming up.
yeah, different conversations. It's gonna keep coming up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Really pay attention to it, especially when you're in conversation with siblings or neighbors or, those kind of close in relationships, cousins and such.
yeah,
And the other thing we want to remind people, there's so much going on during this Capricorn season, and we chose to talk about the nodes, but I really would like to encourage you to go back and listen to the video that we did about the Mars retrograde, because that's such a big piece that's going on right now.
yeah, nice.
And we're going to move on to Pisces rising.
Okay, Pisces rising. Let's see. Capricorn season for you always lands in your 11th house. The 11th house is the place that Lori and I like to talk about as your community. Again, this is the place where you let other people support you, where you show up and you participate and you allow the support of the group to hold you up. And for someone with Pisces rising, the community is a very serious and important place. This is this is a place that you put a lot of stock in your connection to community. And during this Capricorn season, you're really having a chance to dig into that, suss that out, like make sure that your personal stuff is in alignment with the communities that you are sharing yourself with. That's one of the key questions. And then, of course, what you do with that information is the next step in a process. But the key thing is maybe taking some time alone, like taking some time out of that community so that you can gain a more inward view of what your participation is with that. So that's kind of the focus of the season. And it's not lost on me that this is usually a time of year where if you are some sort of public figure or you have a job, that you're probably spending some time with family. So it is a time where you can get a little bit of space and distance from those other topics, perhaps,
Mm.
maybe. But meanwhile, Laurie and I have also included the North Node in Aries on these charts. We really want you to see how these two areas of your life interact. The North Node in Aries represents a place where you have had to stand up. You've had to really employ some courage
Mm.
to really get clear about the way you value yourself. You may have had to do something different with your money, take some risks on a financial level that you have never done before. And that's really a statement about an inward process of like, oh, okay, I've got to do this. I have to be brave and
Mm.
invest myself, perhaps invest my resources into something I hadn't done before. So that's what's happening with the North Node. I mean, think the key word here, courage, having to really push into a new direction since when was it? The summer of 2023. You've really had to kind of suss that out and dig into it. So the trick during Capricorn season is to think about how these two areas relate. So
Mm.
how does your connection to money and this new direction you're going in have an impact on your social status or your interaction with your community? There's an interplay here. Maybe you have more money. You'd like to put more money into your social structures, or maybe it's in reverse.
Mm.
So these are the things that you want to think about is how are these two areas, your community and your financial resources and how you feel about those, how are those connected? And how do you want to bring them together to go into a new direction that has a lot of integrity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just thinking about how the work that you've done with Pisces rising, the work that you've done around developing courage and bravery around how you use your money or how you spend your money or how you make your money or how you understand your own worth, how that work is really supporting you in developing a deeper, deeper level of integrity in how you interact in community. Community
Mhm.
is so important to you. And it would be, I don't want to say it would be easy, but one of the problems with Capricorn is we can go really out of integrity. And the important thing is to have integrity in that area. And as you have developed this more, uh, more strength in your resources or your self-worth, it allows you to bring more integrity to those communities that you might be involved in.
Yeah, I like that because I was thinking with Capricorn in the 11th house, it could be very easy to move into sort of a boss mindset where you're the boss of the community. And it might be true, you might be the boss of parts of the community, but that's not the point of the house. The point of the house is to let your community support you. And that means that you serve that community, even if you are the CEO. And
Right.
that would be, boy, isn't that a valuable lesson about the patriarchy right now? Right?
Exactly. I mean, you might be the
Yeah,
boss and you can be the boss, but you need to be the boss with integrity.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
the
just,
point. And
yeah.
yeah, that's really interesting. And how you use and think about money supports your ability to be in integrity with your community. You're not trying
Yeah.
to rob your community,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, and you're really going to have done the work. You can't fake it with Aries in the second house. Like you really are going to have developed that courage and how you value yourself, and that's what you bring without it being an ego thing, right? With it being a thing that you've done the work and now you can support your community, you can help your community follow
Absolutely.
too. So
That's fascinating. So, the only other thing here for those of you with Pisces rising is, we've included the North Node, but there's so much going on here during this season. We really want to encourage you to go back and listen to the video that we did about Mars retrograde. We do have the timestamps there. So, if you want to, you can just go directly to your rising sign and listen to that because it'll give you a lot more information about the season as well.
yeah. All
All
right.
right. We did it, Jenny.
All right. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Jenny. This was a lot of fun, and we will do another video soon.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.